Do you find yourself stuck at home? Is your hair getting a little bit shaggy and you're thinking, maybe I should cut my own hair? Well, I've been cutting my own hair for a few decades now, so here are some tips for women and men on how to cut your own hair. Tip number one, don't worry about it. Nobody thinks about your hair as much as you do, and so I'm sure it's going to be fine. Besides, now is the perfect time to think about experimenting with this because at most you're going to be like a grainy webcam image on a bunch of online meetings, and so nobody's even going to notice. Unless you do like a YouTube video channel or something like that. When you get your hair done, usually they give you some sort of a poncho to keep the hair from getting all over your clothes. But you're still going to be at your house. So tip number two is just do it in the bathroom. Of course, you don't really need a poncho if you're willing to do it naked. Tip number three, don't ever do this. Suppose you're thinking to yourself, I bet I'd look cute in bangs, especially if they were like right above eyebrow level. So then maybe I'll just grab a bunch of my hair, lean forward, pull it tight to make sure that it's straight, and then cut like one long big line right above my eyebrows. So, 3 things wrong with that. One is you should never pull your hair tight when you're trying to figure out where to cut, because when your hair is pulled tight, it's lower than it usually is. 2, make sure you're not leaning over, because if you're leaned over, then it's going to change the angle of the hair. And then 3, try to avoid like one long cut, because the long cut has a tendency to kind of curve over time, and then you'll end up with something like this. Oh gosh. Okay, let's see what we can do about this. So, tip number 4 is it's generally better to cut a lot of smaller cuts that are, in the same idea than a single long cut. I don't usually give myself bangs because, I don't know, this is just kind of weird. But if I was going to give myself bangs, I would do it with like lots of small little cuts across than a single cut. And well, okay, I mean, that still looks terrible, but at least it's straight. Tip number 5, flat level lines are going to be a lot harder to do than kind of angled straight lines, and straight lines are going to be harder to do than kind of ragged lines. So keep that in mind as you're trying to plan out what you want to do. It's generally why I tend to go for asymmetric kind of angled cuts, because I'm not really going to be sure to get a level line all the way across. Also, kind of think it looks better that way. Tip number 6, use your fingers as well as your eyes. Your fingers can kind of tell when something is a little bit different from everything else next to it. And so what I generally do is I'll like kind of pull and maybe even see like, okay, where's the longest hair? And then I'll just cut that. So like you can see in the back, for example, this section feels a lot longer than this section. So then I can just kind of pull here and then do that. So if you can use both your eyes and your fingers, you'll have a better chance of making sure things are kind of more even, like so. Tip number 7, understand the direction of your hair. So my hair tends to go forward in this side and then kind of more back on this side. So it's kind of like one big spiral like that. And this is important because if I wanted to do something, say, asymmetrical or kind of lying over on one side or another, then I know that it's going to be a little easier to get it to do that on this side. Conversely, if I want to do some sort of faux hawk kind of thing, then it's going to look a little bit easier on this side. This side's going to be a little bit more problematic because it's going to be going like the other direction. So I'm going to have to use a lot of gel or kind of maybe think about a different hairstyle. But in general, the better you know your hair, the better you'll be able to come up with something that works for you. Tip number 8, you can always go shorter. So if it doesn't quite look right, then just try cutting a little bit more and maybe it'll look better. Of course, if you keep on doing that, then eventually at some point you'll be bald. But I think most people would actually look pretty good bald. The other thing I've noticed is that people are more likely to comment on your hair the more different it is from what you had before. So the shorter it is, the more different it usually is going to be from what you had before. The other thing is, I think now is a great time to experiment with things and just sort of see what kind of happens and see what kind of new things we can come up with. Tip number 9, clippers. These things are fantastic for short hair and actually even useful for longer hair because you can use them to kind of go zzz and cut a really nice straight line. Mine also came with a bunch of attachments for different length hair and the poncho, which I never used, but I don't know, maybe you'll find some use for it. And finally, tip number 10, hair product, like gel, mousse, hairspray, whatever. So when you're finished cutting your hair to some reasonable length, then apply a little bit of product to really make your hair pop and to show off all the work that you've done. So with all of that in mind, let's see what we can do with this.
This turned out to be pretty challenging because I'd cut my bangs so short. I had to cut everything else shorter than I'm used to in order to match it. But the nice thing about hair is that it grows. So even if it's too short, it'll eventually recover. Actually, in general, haircuts will look better after a week or so. That's because all those choppy straight cuts you made with scissors will feather out and blend as the individual hairs grow at different speeds. So, again, don't worry about it. Even if you don't like it, give it a few days to see if it evens out. And remember, you can always cut it shorter.
Okay, so that's what it looks like after it's been washed and with some gel in it. So, yeah, not terrible. So there you have it. So hopefully some useful hair cutting tips for you, and best of luck. Dyson, what do you think of the hair? What do you think of the hair?
Friday.
Today is Thursday, Tyson. Have the day started blending together?